not include much of the details, and the recording sessions for of today and yesterday will be provided by today evening or tomorrow early morning or so. So no worries. Dheeraj, I think the record has started, and let's get started now.
Yeah, okay. Good evening, everybody. And now I'll be taking you around two sensors and one actuator. So I'll be sharing my screen now, and let's jump right into the PPT. Yeah. So the title of today's PPT would be Sensors in Action, and the first sensor for today would be a piezoelectric sensor. And the main points of a piezoelectric sensor would be it is a device that uses the piezoelectric effect to measure changes in pressure, acceleration, strain, or force by converting them into an electric charge. So there are certain materials. So there are certain materials that actually produce electrical energy when mechanical stress is applied on them, and the converse is also true. When electrical energy is applied on them, mechanical stress occurs. So they are mainly used to detect sound in piezoelectric microphones and piezoelectric pickups for electrically amplified guitars. Piezoelectrical microbalances are used as very sensitive chemical and biological sensors. Piezos are used in electronic drum pads to detect the impact of the drummer sticks. These are a few applications of piezoelectric sensors. And let's talk about some physics now. The physics behind the piezoelectric sensor. And it is called piezoelectric effect, as the name suggests. And it is the appearance of an electrical potential across certain faces of a crystal when it is subject to mechanical pressure. So what happens is when you go deep inside the atomic structures of crystals, then of elements, and in their crystal structures, you have HEC, CPP, and so many other 14 types of Bravais lattices, right? So in those minute sizes, when an electrical effect is applied on them, they produce mechanical effect. So conversely, when a mechanical pressure is applied on them, an electrical pressure, an electrical charge is produced, and which gives a rise in the voltage, and a fluctuation in the voltage gives electrical current, and that electrical current drives our microcontroller's input, and the cycle follows. So the schematic diagram of a piezoelectric sensor would look somewhat like this, and the top and bottom yellow discs are electrodes, and when force is applied on the any of the plate, the piezoelectric transducer is the material which actually compresses, and due to its mechanical compression, the mechanical stress would be converted into electrical energy, and that electrical energy would be given out through these wires in the right. Through these wires in the right. So these would be connected into the Arduino or any other microcontroller you wish. And in reality, a piezoelectric sensor would look somewhat like this. It is very small, and so it is very delicate too. And these are both the disc. You can see a disc here, right? So this is the second disc, and these both are the electrodes. And this somewhat brown color material which you see is the piezoelectric material in between them. So when a pressure is applied on the top plate, the both the discs compress in opposite directions, and here again a mechanical stress is produced and an electrical current is produced. So the electric current is sent out from these wires. So the applications of a piezoelectric sensor would include the pressure sensor in the touchpads of mobile phones. In mobile phones, beneath your touch screens, these very highly sensitive piezoelectric sensors would be there. So they'll be actually taking your finger response or stimulus, and then the phone's microcontroller would react according to the stimulus, and to measure pressure inside the cylinder of a gasoline engine. Right, you heard that this one, right? PV P1 V1 equal to P2 V2. I hope so. This is Boyle's law. So, according to this law, according to the volume, the pressure increases, right? So, when you keep a piezoelectric sensor here, the volume inside this chamber would actually put direct pressure into this piezoelectric sensor. And according to the pressure, again, a force is applied on this because pressure equal to force per area, right? So since area is remaining constant, since volume is remaining constant here, so the area too remains constant, and so a force is applied, and then you get mechanical stress, and then that converts into electrical energy. And based on those electrical fluctuations, you can actually calculate the amount of gas present in the container without actually, measuring by physical methods. This is the safer method, and it is used in various applications such as medical, aerospace, nuclear instrumentation. The next sensor we'll be talking about is the ultrasonic sensor. And this is basically what an ultrasonic sensor looks like. I'll be explaining the pin diagram to you, no worries. And an ultrasonic sensor works on a principle similar to radar or sonar, which evaluates attributes of a target by interpreting the echoes from radio or sound waves, respectively. Ultrasonic sensors generate high frequency sound waves and evaluate the echo, which is received back by the sensor. So I'll be discussing the principle of an ultrasonic sensor too, and these are the electrical parameters of an ultrasonic sensor. This sensor here is one of the ultrasonic sensors used widely in the world. It is an HC SR04 module, and it operates at a 5 voltage module, and the current in it would be 15 milliamperes, and its operating clock frequency would be 40 kilohertz or 4 megahertz. And you can see here on this clock diagram it is giving 4.0, which is 4 megahertz, and its farthest range would be 4 meters. So it can detect the presence of an object from 4 meters from its actual position. So this distance would be somewhat 4 meters. And its nearest range would be 2 centimeters. So it can distinguish various sound waves and its reflections at the nearest at 2 centimeters. And its measuring angle would be 15 degrees, right? So if this is the sensor right here, and these are the starting emitter and receiver pairs, so this degree is, let us say this is a 15 degree. So any object between these both lines would be coming into this fields of vision of this sensor, and anything outside this the sensor can't recognize them. So yeah, this is the pin diagram of the HC SR04 sensor. As I've told you, this is the crystal oscillator. So why do we need a separate crystal oscillator for this ultrasonic sensor? The reason behind it is an ultrasonic sensor, so it needs to produce sound waves, right? And to produce those sound waves and to calculate the time, we need a timer. So this crystal oscillator here works as a timer, and it is independent of the Arduino. And so this is the transmitter for ultrasonic waves, and this is the receiver for ultrasonic waves. So waves from this transmitter part get out of this sensor, and the same wave, after getting reflected from, suppose say, this imaginary surface or object, get received here. And there is a formula for calculating the distance, as you all know. I will be explaining you too. The starting there are 4 pins to this sensor, and the starting pin is VCC. It is connected to the plus 5 volts supply, and this is the trigger input pin. So, and this is the echo output pin. You might have understood what these mean by their names. It is an echo, which means it is the reflection back of the sound. And this is the trigger. So this pin is used when you want to send a wave from the sensor. And this pin is used when you want to calculate the received echo wave from the sensor. This is the ground pin, and this is used to connect it to 0 volt or ground, which is basically used to complete the circuit. So how does an ultrasonic sensor work? Ultrasonic sensors work by emitting sound waves at a frequency too high for humans to hear. Then they wait for the sound to be reflected back, calculating distance based on the time required. This is similar to how radar measures the time it takes a radio wave to return after hitting an object. While some sensors use a separate sound emitter and receiver, it's also possible to combine these into one package device, having an ultrasonic element alternate between emitting and receiving signals. This type of sensor can be manufactured in a smaller package than with separate elements, which is convenient for applications where size is at premium. So the HC04 HCSR04 sensor here has two separate elements for sending and receiving sound waves, but some sensors here, as said, have both as the same input and output sensor. So I'll draw a basic diagram. So this is somewhat the sensor will look like, and there is a small functional part here which actually differentiates between what is the wave that is going out from the sensor and what wave is coming into the sensor. And so yeah, when you need to create machines which work at very small environments like inside a human or in very minute places, you can actually use these kind of sensors. And while radar and ultrasonic sensors can be used for some of the same purposes, sound based sensors are readily available. They can be had for just a couple of dollars. Yeah, they are very cheap too, and they may detect more effectively than radar. For instance, while radar or even light based sensors have difficult time correctly processing clear plastic, because plastic and all are translucent materials. They are not transparent and they are not opaque too. So they are translucent materials, and light partially passes through them. So light sensors, it will be hard for them to actually calculate the distance and other values which we want from them. But for an ultrasonic sensor, it is sound. So even though you send light through it, the partial dispersion of the light would cause the sensor to work ineffectively. But in a sound wave, it actually reflects back to you no matter what the property of the surface is. So this becomes a little more accurate, and in fact they're unaffected by the color of the material they are sensing, because in light, VIBGR, right? VIBGYOR, and when red light goes into blue light, then they both combine and become green light, right? So that becomes a problem for here in the light sensor, but in sound sensors it is unaffected by these factors. On the other hand, if an object is made out of a material that absorbs sound or is shaped in such a way that it reflects sound, then the readings will be unreliable. Yeah, everything has its pros and its cons. So, according to your need, you can use a light sensor or a sensor, ultrasonic sensor. But if you use an ultrasonic sensor, make sure that the material from which you expect a reflection does not absorb sound and is not shaped in such a way that it reflects the sound away from the receiver, right? Because if it reflects the sound away from this 15 degrees angle, suppose you sent a wave like this and it reflects like this, and it is out of the field vision of this sensor, then it is a problem, right? So you can't get your reading back. So make sure that doesn't happen. And distance equal to half time into c. Speed equal to distance by time. So in an ultrasonic sensor, c is the speed of sound. So an ultrasonic sensor is basically the sound sensor, so it uses the speed of sound. It varies according to the material which you use. It is faster in solids and it is slower in gases. And so basically, why it is half time into c. Normally here in this formula, we can imply that distance equal to time into speed, right? Because as you can see here, the wave is going and is again returning back. So actually, if the wave took 2 seconds to go from the sensor till the object, then the receiver wave would take another 2 seconds to come from the object to the receiver. So for this wave to go and this output to return, so we need 4 seconds. But the actual time taken by this wave to go till the object is 2 seconds. So this should be 4 by 2, right? And it works in any case. It is simple mathematics. So the formula is half time into c. And I hope this is clear. And what are ultrasonic sensors used for? The applications of ultrasonic sensor and robot navigation comes to mind, as well as factory automation. Water level sensing is another good use and can be accomplished by positioning one sensor above a water surface. Another aquatic application is the use of sensors to see the bottom of a body water traveling through the water but reflecting off the bottom below. right? Because ships use these, right? So consider my drawing, it isn't that good, but still. So it uses a sensor, and yeah, it actually calculates the depth. Or you might have you might have a submarine here, and it actually uses ultrasonic sensors everywhere from its every angle to actually sense any upcoming dangers or any upcoming ridges or reefs it has. And they are widely used in navigation. And apart from that, you can use ultrasonic sensors into robotics pretty widely. And though it might not be immediately obvious, it if configured correctly, ultrasonic sensors can even measure fluid flow rates. In the simplest case, an emitter and a receiver are aligned in the flow of the fluid. Since sound is traveling through a medium, since sound is traveling through a moving medium, the speed of sound relative to those elements would be increased or decreased by the velocity of the fluid. This can be applied to flow inside pipes by aligning these two elements at an angle to each other. So that those are some applications of ultrasonic sensors, and I hope you'll use them very widely. So the next we'll be talking about is an actuator, and as I've already told you, the difference between a sensor and an actuator. So a sensor is something which gives input to a microcontroller in simple terms, and an actuator is something that takes input from a microcontroller and does the work. So a servo, I'll be talking about a servo motor for the example of an actuator. And a servo is a control system which, through the use of feedback or internal control, has the capability for accurate and repeatable control of one or more of the following dynamic parameters: position, velocity, and torque. A servo axis is a principal dimension along which motion occurs. The machine hardware, uh, yeah, this is what a typical servo motor looks like. So these are all external parts, right? You don't need to worry about these. This is the servo motor which is of our concern, and this is what it basically looks like. So this motor is controlled, is the electrical impulses to this motor are given by a microcontroller. And the microcontroller may be an Arduino, or it might be an ESP8266 or any other microcontroller which you might find suitable for that job. And the servo motor, in fact, it gives a feedback, and according to that feedback, you can adjust the you can adjust the actuator, and you can actually adjust these three factors, which might play a very key role in robotics. Because normally, if you want to build a robot, you need to make sure that your position, your velocity is very accurate up to the mark, right? And so when that happens, and it is connected to a microcontroller, and when this happens, you can actually control this load and everything. And the load, I see the objective from here is to move the load from here to here safely, right? So you can adjust the position of the load according to the weight, and you can adjust the velocity, and you can also adjust the torque, right? So you can, the objective here should be completely satisfied. And yeah, this is the schematic diagram of a servo motor. It has three pins, as you can see here. This is a simple servo motor which has three pins. This is the gear system. These gears actually ride the external mechanical machines which do not need electrical impulses to work. This is the 5-volt input signal which we are giving into the motor, and this comes from the microcontroller, as well as it can come from battery. That is your wish. And then this is the ground which is used to connect, which is used to complete the circuit. And this is the second pin here, which is the actual pin which we are going to connect to the microcontroller. And from the instructions from the microcontroller, the servo motor works, right? So it depends on your program. And the applications of a servo motor, and it is very widely used in robotics. Without a servo motor, no robotic application is completely fulfilled. It is used in conveyor belts, as we have discussed here. This is the application of a conveyor belt, right? A load is actually moving from this end to this end. So it is used in camera autofocus. Have you ever wondered how your camera automatically focuses things that are in front of you? I mean, so it is actually a combination of software as well as electronics. And according to the program, the servo motor adjusts the program, adjusts the focus of the lens so that the object in front of you, the object in front of you gets focused, right? So if you want to focus anything behind you, you just click there, and the software automatically recognizes, and the servo motor will actually adjust the focus to the behind object. So the robotic vehicles, you can see these, right? Robotic vehicles, like suppose you have self-driving machines and all. So servo motors do play a very key role. And solar tracking system. Yeah, you can use a light sensor in combination with. You can use a light sensor along with a combination with a servo motor, and the light sensor actually, it will find out which angle has the highest intensity of light, and it will give an information to this servo motor, and then this servo motor will actually turn the solar panel towards that side. So this is how a simple project can be made to get maximum electric current from a solar panel. So it is used in CNC machines. It is used in antenna positioning, to get the maximum strong. It can actually be used again to find out in which angle the strongest signal is present, and it can be used in metal cutting and metal forming, grinding, pressing, punching, bending machines in metal fabrication industries. So it can be used in textiles industries, it can be used in printers, and automatic door openers are based on servo motors. It is a simple application of a servo motor, and I bet you too can create automatic door openers using ultrasonic sensor and a servo motor. And I really hope this would be a great project for you. And now I'll be talking about this debugging, because debugging does play a very important role in your programming, right? Because if you know how to program and if you know how to connect wires, but somehow your program isn't working, so that is when debugging comes into part. And yeah, debugging is basically, it means identifying the error location, analyzing the error, proving the analysis, and then covering lateral damage. So these are the five parts of debugging. You need to make sure where the error is. You need to make sure what the error is, and you need to make sure what solves the error, and you need to make sure that your solution provides an effective solution. And you should also make sure that your solution does not include damage for other parts of your program. So if you are sure of these 5 points, then your program is bug free. So these are the type of errors that programmers actually see through. So they are namely syntax errors, semantic errors, type errors, runtime errors, and logical errors. So I'll be discussing these, and then you'll be going into your practical session. So syntax error occurs when the rules of programs are violated. When you don't speak the language of a computer, this is when it is called a syntax error. Suppose you see here, after the main function, a CLR SCR statement is given, which is to clear the screen, but you don't have a semicolon here, right? So when you don't have a semicolon here, the statement doesn't end here. So the compiler recognizes this CLR SCR and this printf as a single line. And when this happens, it is unsure of what that is, and that becomes an invalid statement. So that is when syntax errors are there. So make sure your syntax is perfect, and type errors are somewhat like syntax errors, but they are different in some senses. So semantic errors, talking about semantic errors, this error occurs when statements has no meaning, right? Because when you might have come through this error, a variable has no it has no value, right? So here in this program you can see the four variables declare: a, b, c, and d, and it is given that a by b plus d equal to c. So normally C out C. So there is no initial value for A, B, C, 2. But even though you don't have these, maybe take some garbage values too. So if you take some garbage values, and the actual meaning of this statement is the value of C is getting, so the value of C is getting into this thing. So whatever the this is called, it's called E. So a by b plus d, so it is getting the value of this is getting updated by the value of c. So this has nothing to do with the c out of c, right? Because the value of c isn't changing and it isn't getting initialized to. This is the initialization of a by b plus d, not c. So if you want to write c equal to a by b plus d, you have to write like this. So the computer it reads in this format and not the otherwise. So when you write it like this, then the computer understands that, okay, the value of C is getting updated like this. And so now I have to print the value of C. And next coming is the type errors. This error occurs when data or value of unexpected type is passed or input, right? So int a equal to 2 and b equal to 4 is initialized. That is perfect with a semicolon. And cout sum equal to a plus b. This is fine. But in the return statement, it is given the string of ab without any operation in between. So the type here, return type here in this function is given as int, but the actual returning value, here in this return statement is a string, right? So these both conflict each other. So this is a type error, not a typo error. This is a type error. So type error is a return type error, or you might call it in a generalized form as a data type error. And the fourth type of error you'll get is the runtime error, when you find errors in the execution of the program. This error occurs during the execution of some illegal operation or unavailability of conditions for executing. Suppose, division by error is the most common runtime error which you'll ever find in your programming languages. So, int main is declared fine and a bracket is opened, and then two values a equal to 2 and b equal to 0 with a semicolon are initialized perfect. Then you're outputting the value of a by b. So, right, when it compiles because this is a perfect grammatical program without any grammatical or syntax errors. And but while running, it actually performs the 2 by 0. And 2 by 0 is an illegal expression, right? Nobody knows the value of this. And so actually, in the late 1970s, hackers actually used this operation to actually jam the computers. So what happened is the computers used to get jammed when this operation is occurred, and the queue and to actually recover the computer, the whole queue had to be refreshed, and every electrical element in that circuit had to be refreshed with an electrical pulse. And yeah, that used to take so much of time and cause a lot of damage. And the fifth type of errors that are there are the logical errors. And to explain this, these are the type of errors which you get when you don't calculate the thing for which you want. Suppose you want to calculate the sum of two numbers, and then you have instead in the program you have written a program for the product of two numbers, right? So you will never get the both values equal until there are some special cases, right? So you'll be getting the product of those values, and then you will be expecting the sum of those values, which never actually are equal. So this error which causes a program to produce incorrect or undesired output, right? So in this program, the function is declared perfectly, and the bracket is opened, and three values a, b, and flag are declared. And while flag double equal to 1, you'll print the sum, right? So do consider here the value of flag is not getting updated, it is 0. And this while loop is actually telling that if the value of flag is 1, then you have to print the sum of a and b. And because the value of this flag always stays 0 because there's no updation, this program is grammatically fine. Even though this program is grammatically fine, this program does not produce an output, and you'll be wondering why. So this is the logical bug here right now, and you need to find this, and you need to find a mechanism to update the value of flag. And I guess that's it for the theory session of this class. And so you'll be having your practical sessions after this. And after this practical session, you'll also be having your some sorry, you'll be having your project demonstration for 1 or 2 days based on your speed. And that is it. I'll be handing this over to Rohit. Rohit, please continue with the practical session.
Thank you, Dheeraj. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
Rohit.
fine.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen now. Can you see my screen? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, guys. Welcome back to another practical session. Today we'll be looking into two experiments, one with the ultrasonic rangefinder and another with the servo motor. So let's create a new circuit right away. So do this with me simultaneously so that you can catch up. So let's bring Arduino Uno into the picture. And one interesting thing here is we have two ultrasonic rangefinders in our equipment. Yeah, we have two of them right here. Let's look into two of them. Let's see what's the difference between both of them. See, one says it's from parallax.com. It's a company, and it says ping sensor. Both of them are the same, but let's see what's the difference. And this, as Dheeraj said, it's HCR04. So we can use any of these. That won't be a problem. So the differences between these two lies in the actual structure inside them. I mean, as Dheeraj said, when you see the data sheet, so this he told about this sensor. This is capable of like 3 centimeters to 3 meters. I mean, the range of this sensor is from, it's capable of measuring distances between 3 centimeters to 3 meters, and this has some other different distance. And another more important difference is you have 3 pins for this, but whereas you have 4 pins. Uh, we have ground pin here, which is common, and we have a power pin, which is 5 volts. So this is VCC, this is power pin, and it has signal pin, whereas this thing has 2 pins, which is trigger pin and echo pin. So what advantage you have with this parallax sensor is these both are combined into a single signal pin. So you need not use separate pins for a trigger pin and echo pin. So this is a transmitter and this is receiver, right? So with the trigger pin will be controlling the transmitter and with echo pin will be controlling the receiver. But whereas here we'll use the single signal pin to control both of them. So for better understanding, and also as Dheeraj said, we talked about this sensor, right? So let's use this itself in our project. You can use this too. You can try that out in your home. So let me delete it. Okay. You can make use of a breadboard actually, but as we have only two components, I see there's no problem in it. So let's start right away by making the connections. So the VCC power goes to 5 volts. The ground pin goes to ground. This is pretty obvious. So let me change the colors. Ground would be black. And we'll be using 2 pins. We'll be connecting both of these to any two digital pins right here. Let's use any two of the pins. Let me connect trigger pin to, let's say, digital pin 7. Yes. Let's connect echo pin to digital pin 8. So we are done here. So in case of other sensor, you don't need these two ports. You will be with, you can deal with any one of the port like either 7 or 8. That won't be a problem. So let's look into the code right away. change this to text. And let me delete it. So one convenient way to write this code is through a function. So here is to find the distance of any object which is put before the ultrasonic sensor. So we need distance. So if we do some math, we know speed equal to distance by time, right? So distance is speed into time. And speed of what? See, we have speed right here. We are talking about speed of sound here. So speed of sound is approximately 343 meters per second. Let's use 340 for this project. If you Google it, you will get 343. There are different values actually. And the main motto here is to find the time. So that time is nothing but the time taken for the signal to travel between the object to the echo sensor. See, we have this echo pin right here, right? We have this echo, which is the receiver, right? So if you have an object here, when signal travels from here to here and here to here, we are interested to find this time. So that's why we divided the whole equation by 2, as Dheeraj said. You'll be seeing that in code. So let's write a function first. And one more important thing about this sensor is, this actually will be dealing with times in microseconds. So that is one important point we need to keep in mind in this project. So if you're dealing with microseconds, so that might be a very huge number. So when dealing with huge numbers, so we'll be dealing with long, and let's name our function, let's say, as it deals with time, that interested in finding time. And it takes 2 values actually. I mean, one argument would be the trigger pin. You need to give it as an integer, or else that would throw you an error. Another one would be the echo pin. Yes. So what this function does is, it takes 2 parameters, trigger pin and echo pin, finds out the duration, and as the duration, that the value is of type long, because we get microseconds, which may turn out to be a huge number. So we need to use long here. If you use an int, it would throw you an error. And first thing you need to do is, you should start working with the transmitter. So this would be acting as an output, and the receiver would be acting as an input, because this is where we need to calculate the time. So first we need to set the pin mode here. Actually, you can, as you're writing this function first, that's why you're using pin mode here. So trigger pin, let's set that to output. And first thing we need to make sure is, we need to make sure to clear any residual signal. If there is any residual signal, we need to clear that. So as safety, we will need to put this as low. So we'll use digital write. Put this as low. This is optional, but you need to do it to make sure to clear this any residual signal if you have, right? Trigger pin too low, and we don't want to put this low for a couple of seconds. So we use a delay function. So to set the limit for putting this in low, and as we whole project we are dealing with microseconds, so there is a new function called delay microseconds. The standard delay function, you give arguments with milliseconds, but this function, it takes of value which is in microseconds. So let's say 2 microseconds. You can give any value. Make sure you put it as small as possible. And now let's start our experiment. And now let's put this to high. We want to start sending out signal from the transmitter end and find where it hits the object. Okay, fine. We want to stay this for a couple of microseconds, not 2, but value more than 2, because this is the real part of the experiment, right? So let's keep it on for a couple of seconds, microseconds, sorry. This is capital, I guess. We may check that out when debugging. That would be a good practice. Oh, sorry. I repeated the previous. Okay. That's a doubt for Dheeraj. I thought it's for me. Okay. So I delete it for 10 microseconds and I want to put it low again. Still rate. Let's switch off this transmitter. And now, after the signal hits the object, it need to come back, right? And that signal is received by the receiver. So the main job of this receiver is to take in the input. So let's set this pin to pin, takes in the input. Yes, it takes in the input, and there is a function which you need to see. There is a function called pulse in. It takes two arguments, which is the port or the pin. So it takes echo pin and high. So I'll explain you what's this. So this function calculates the total time taken for this pin to go from low to high. So what happens is when the signal immediately strikes back the object and it's traveling towards the receiver, as soon as it hits the receiver, it goes from low to high. So it calculates the total time for this receiver to go high. So if we put low here, then it calculates the total time for it to go from high to low. But in this case, we are calculating the time for it to turn from low to high. And this value, this function gives our answer or duration. Excuse me. This gives value in microseconds. So that is why I'm dealing with all microseconds here. So that is one important thing to put in mind. This gives a value or this returns a value in microseconds. And this is our answer actually. We are returning our answer in microseconds. Now we need to make use of this time in the formula. Speed equal to distance by time, right? We need distance here. So we need to make use of this in our formula. Distance equal to speed into time. So let's start void setup. And actually we are interested in printing those distances into our serial monitor. So let's start serial communication. Okay. So in the void loop, we'll be calculating the distance. You can calculate the distances in any units. You can do it in inches, kilometers, meters, or centimeters. I am calculating in centimeters here to make it easy for you. So let's declare a variable. Let's call it cm. And so as I said, distance equal to speed into time. So it is 340 meters per second, but we need to convert this value because all our units are in microseconds. So 340 meters per second is 0.034 micro. If we convert it into microseconds, this, so 340 meters per second is actually 0.034 microseconds per centimeter. So this is centimeter, right? We need to convert those meters into centimeters and those seconds to microseconds. So 1 second is 10 power 6 microseconds and 1 meter is 100 centimeters. So you can do the math. So you arrive at this value and you need to multiply with like distance is equal to speed into time, rate. And where is our time? So this function, so duration, this is our function right here. And what is our trigger pin right here? We convert the trigger pin to 7. So 7, comma, and echo pin is 8. fine. But as I said, as Dheeraj said, we need to divide it by 2. You know the obvious reasons. And you need to print this value into the serial monitor. So serial. I'm not using print ln because I want to print it consecutively. So first I'll print the centimeters first, and then I'll print the string centimeters. So if I get 5 here, then I'll print out 5 centimeters onto the screen. So as this goes very fast, let me give it a delay of, let's say, 15 microseconds, milliseconds, sorry. So this is a program. We may get some errors. Let's check if we get some errors or not. Fortunately, we don't get any errors. So if you open our serial monitor, okay, it's giving some new values. Okay, actually, let's print a new line here because we got our output as some mess. So print ln. Let's see, it's good. Yeah, it says 112 centimeters. Let's see what's going on in our sensor. So we can't move it. Let's stop it for a second. So let's start the simulation. And if we click it, and this is where our object is. So when we show the code, it says 112 centimeters right here, but whereas here it shows 113. So there are some quite variations. As I said, the speed of sound is 343 meters per second. I took the value of 340, so there will be slight variations. So if I change this to any other random place, the distance varies, and this is in inches and this is in centimeters. You can convert into inches by dividing the value of centimeters by 2.54. You can see those in conversion tables. So we get 67 centimeters here, whereas you got 68.1. So this must be quite clear. So that is it for this experiment. So until now, if you have any doubts, you can ask me in the chat box. I'll continue with experiment. So let's work with the servo motor now, which is really very important in the field of robotics. This will also help you in your final project. You can make good use of it. So one good thing is, instead of basic, if you search for Arduino, you get a ready-made circuit with breadboard, which is actually good. You can try that out. You can put. We'll be controlling the servo motor with the help of a potentiometer. Like if you rotate the knob on the potentiometer, the shaft on the servo motor will be rotating accordingly. Let's check that out. We need a potentiometer for this, and we need a servo motor. Micro servo. So you can connect this anywhere randomly. Okay. And put this right here. So first let's connect our potentiometer. So this is terminal 2. Connect terminal 1 to power. This is power. Let's put it red. Let's connect this terminal to. So this is our important terminal. It's where you will be controlling voltages and you will be controlling the motor. So you need to connect this. I mean, through this pin itself, you will be providing different analog values. So you will be connecting this to one of the analog pin. So let's connect this directly to analog pin A0.
Excuse me, Rohit, just a minute. I think few people are asking to re-explain the code of the program you said. So could you please repeat the code?
Okay, of the ultrasonic sensor. Okay, so let's go back. I mean, this got saved, I guess. So here is the code. So I'll explain you the flow of the code or what you want to find out here. So we are interested here in finding out the distance. So let's start with void setup. You're beginning the serial communication with the statement serial.begin. You can see that in the serial monitor right here. And next we'll be going on with void loop. And we are declaring a variable called centimeters. CM is for centimeters. And this is the formula, as Dheeraj said, for calculating the distance. This is the speed, and we divide it by 2 into duration. So as soon as we arrive here, the control immediately shifts to this part of the program. So this is the function which I have written. So this is the return type, and these are the parameters. So we supplied 7 and 8 here, right? The 7 goes and it stores in the trigger pin. These are actual parameters, and these are the parameters which we'll be working on in the function. So 7 gets stored in trigger pin because we connected here. We connected this transmitter to 7, and this 8 goes and stores in the echo pin. And this function returns time rate. I mean, the answer this gives is time rate, and that time is of the type long variable because the answer microseconds is very long number. So you'll be returning a number of type long. So this is the return type. So this is long. That's why you wrote long here. And you'll start pin mode. So you're setting up transmitter right here, right? So this is transmitter. It gives the output, and this is the receiver. It takes the input. So that's why you set this up to output. So this trigger pin, this is trigger pin, right? So this is connected to trigger pin. This is to echo pin. So this gives output, and we need to make sure that this trigger pin is low initially, because by mistake if it's on, we need to clear everything. We should make sure that there is no signal at all initially. So we wrote digital write trigger pin to low. So trigger pin is 7 here. So digital write 7 comma low. So this is 7, right? So this is set to low, and this is set to low for 2 microseconds. The delay microseconds function does that. So for 2 microseconds, this port stays low. And now we need to start our experiment. To do that, we need to send a signal from the transmitter. So we need to put this as high. So digital write trigger pin is 7, and we need to put it to high because we need to start sending some signal, and we need to send the signal for some couple of microseconds. So that's why we used the delay microseconds function again for 10 microseconds. And again, immediately after sending for 10 microseconds, we need to again switch off this port actually, because the transmission part is over. Now it's the job of the receiving part. So I set this pin again to off, I mean to low. And now I set now it's time for input, right? So the input is done by receiver or the echo pin. So this is echo pin. This is connected to port 8. So I set this pin mode echo pin to input because it acts as an input pin. And now what it does is, this function is the new function. It's a pulse-in function. So this returns the time taken for this port 8 to go from low to high. So that's why we gave echo pin. This is the input pin, the pin 8, and high, because this returns the function. This returns the time taken for this pin, for this echo pin to go from low to high. So initially the echo pin is low actually. It's in 0 state. It got changed. I'm sorry. So initially it is in low actually. This echo pin is in low. So immediately after receiving the signal, it goes high. This receiver end goes high, right? So it calculates the time taken for this echo pin to go from low to high. So that's very important in this program. So, and we are returning this value. So this function, this is a built-in function actually. So this function returns a value. So we get some value here. Actually, it returns right here. This returns microseconds. So we have microseconds here. So in place some value in microseconds gets substituted here. That is exactly the time for the echo pin to go from low to high, and this goes here. So this comes right in, and instead of this duration 7,8, we'll get our answer here. So this calculates everything and gives our answer. This gets multiplied and gets stored into centimeters, and we are printing that centimeter value into the serial monitor right here. We start, you can see this gets printed right here, and I printed centimeters right after that to print the word cm. And immediately after printing this, I want to go to the next line. So that's why I wrote serial dot print ln. Ln means a new line. So I went to the new line and I'm printing the values. And I want a delay of 15 seconds because the text in serial monitor goes down very fast. So to observe the values, you need some delay. So I gave 15 milliseconds as delay. So that's it for this program. So am I clear? Venkata Rohit? If you have any doubts, you can ask so that I can move on to next experiment. Okay. Okay, very good. So let's resume this servo motor thing. Oh, this is already done, I guess. So we resumed our session. So one terminal of the potentiometer, another one, with the help of this pin itself, with the help of this wiper pin itself, we are going to turn this knob and our servo motor is going to rotate accordingly. This is capable of rotating from 0 to 180 degrees. So we'll be providing analog values because that's not digital, right? Digital means 0 and 1, low and high. It's not 0 and 180. So here you will be exploring values between 0 and 180. So that's why you connected this pin to analog pin. And the other pin, as usual, will be going to ground. I'll be setting this to black. Fine. And we have our motor here, servo motor. So the first pin says it needs to be connected to ground. It's connected to ground. This is nearer, so I'm connecting it here. The second one says power. You can connect it here. I'm setting it to red. The last one says signal. So we can connect to any of the digital pin, but as we are we need to connect to pins only with the tilde symbol. So we have 3, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, right? We need to connect to any of these pins only because we'll be using pulse width modulation. See, we have in the brackets PWM with this symbol. So we need to connect it to one of those PWM pins. So the signal goes, let's say, to pin 9. Fine. Now we are ready with the circuit. Now let's move on to the code. So one good thing with the Arduino is it comes up with predefined libraries and header files. So before doing any servo motor experiment, initial library or a special header file which is called servo.h, because in this header file, actually this is a header file actually, you are telling to include servo.h header. because this servo.h file has a lot of classes and lot of features. If we make use of those features, then our work is so easy. And this has a lot of classes, so we need to make use of one class we have in the servo.h is called the servo class. So we have a concept called classes. Make note of that. So this is a servo class, and we need to create an object of any name for my servo. You can create any object of your choice. I'm creating it my servo. So which this statement means I can access servo class with my servo. So this servo class has many functions like attach, read, write, and so on, like numerous functions. We can access all those functions with the help of this object, my servo object. You can name this as you wish. So I'll show you how you can access those functions. So let's start with void setup. And for the servo motors, we attached this signal pin to pin 9. So to set up a servo motor, we have a special function we are accessing with our object. So what is our object? My servo. So we are accessing that function with the help of dot operator. We put dot in this function called attach. So this function is the part of servo class. So in servo class we have a lot of functions. So attach function is one of it. My servo dot attach, and to which pin we have attached it? To 9. That's nice. Now let's start with void loop. And also we have connected this wiper pin to A0, right? So let me also declare my analog pin right here. Let me call it wiper pin, and I've set it to 0, right? A0, right? So let's put 0 here. And let me create a value, integer value. With this value itself, we will be rotating this servo motor shaft. This value between 0 to 180 degrees. So first we need to read the value from this analog pin. So which function we'll be using? Analog read, and we're reading it from pin 0, A0. And what is it? It's a wiper pin. As you put 0 here, wiper pin there. So one major problem here is this output the values between 0 to 1023. But what are the possible degrees with this shaft? 0 to 180 degrees, right? But these have values 0 to 1023. So we need to change our range from 0 to 1023 to 0 to 180 degrees. So if you remember from previous class, I used a function called map, which takes in the value which you want to put in between new range. You give it the old range. Which is the old range? 0 to 1023, because this is the range this is the range which is outputted by these analog pins. So 180 degrees, because the servo motor takes values between 0 to 180. That's why we need to change the range. And we have so my object is my servo, right? There's the function in the servo class which is write, which writes value into the servo motor. So my servo dot write. This function is also a built-in function in servo class, and we are writing some value here. And let us give a delay, which is very important. I mean, to observe the readings. I mean, to observe the effect. Let's say 10. So let's make sure everything is okay. If there is an error, it shows up. So let's start simulation. Okay. Actually, there is a small pulse that's rotated initially. So if you see here, as soon as I rotate this, see I'm rotating this knob, observe carefully. See it's rotating. So this is the final reading. This is the initial reading. So turn the way all from 0 to 180 degrees. You can also turn it back. So that's it for the servo motor experiment. If there are any doubts, you can ask me in the chat box. I'm stopping the simulation. Harshita can take on from here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dheeraj and Rohit. I hope everything is clear with the session. Hope the programs also went good and things are also pretty clear with the sensors and actuators as well. So, guys, you came across different types of errors too. And any doubts, you can demonstrate